good evening and Sláinte. And for those watching either on the Facebook or the YouTube, apparently there's a couple seconds delay, which is really funny. I hadn't even noticed that, and I've now done this as the 23rd, I think, episode. But someone said there's a slight delay. So for I'm not too sure who's in front, because maybe I could like say a joke and someone doesn't get it until they get the catch up on the next bit. But welcome. And tonight is a very, well, for me, it's just a very exciting opportunity to talk about one of the largest independent bottlers in the world, really, you know, of Scotch single malts and Scots blends. And, you know, where do we start? Where do we start with the liquor that we have available from Douglas Laing and Co? Where do we start? There's just such an abundance of fantastic whiskey. I'm lucky. I have Stuart Baxter tonight, who's the global brand ambassador, international superstar, man of mystery, all over the place, gets to travel, gets to have loads of fun. Probably has one of the best jobs on the planet when it comes to whiskey. Am I jealous? Of course. I mean, I'm not a brand ambassador, and if I was one, I'd want to be him, you know? So, although I would say he's obviously Scottish, and he's far more suave than I am, but so, I mean, I think I could do the role. I think I could talk the talk when it comes to these whiskies. So if Stuart's ready, we can bring him in. We can, yeah, he's got a thumbs up. So we'd like to welcome Stuart Baxter onto the show. There we go, Stuart. We're in.
How are we doing?
Great, absolutely great. We've got some lovely, so we have these, as I say, there's a lot of regulars who pop in and they're really spot on straight away. They love to have their wee comments. So David here. So David and Fiona own Shortcross Distillery, based here in Ireland, about to launch this year their first whiskies, which is you know, super stuff. Michael, great to see you. Keith, how are you? Jonathan Ramirez, brilliant, based down in Ireland, in the southern part of Ireland. Connor, how are we? Sean, good to see you. William, Eric, Belgium, yes, good man, Eric. Peter, yes, long time no here. I know you shouldn't have phoned me an hour ago. Was that what it was? Okay, Chris, great. And look, Martin's even saying hi to Stuart. Super stuff.
Hey everyone. Hey everyone.
Stuart, and there'll be people just coming in and out. And there's Robert from. Could you just right? Okay, there's Robert from Sweden. All right, okay, we get it. You can say hi all night. It's great fun. Before we start the chat, I'm going to pour some whiskey, and I'm sure you will as well. You'll have some. Well, actually, you told me what your lineup is, and I'm really like, I'm kind of going. I've got some good whiskey here, but you might have better.
I was fortunate enough to be in quite an intense tasting, and I mean intense in a very positive way, just before I came on. Not that that's foreshadowing any slurring of words that's about to come. But I mean, top line, let's say that tasting was a Port Ellen 32 extra particular. It's a piece of whiskey history, absolutely stunning. Paul, if I remember, I'll see if I can save you a dram, but I can't promise.
32 years old, Port Ellen.
Yeah.
Let that sink in. 32 years old.
I mean, I was just twinkling my father's eye.
From Port Ellen. You're drinking nectar of the gods here. Like,
yeah.
You know, it's not like, you know, great stuff. And the history of Port Ellen is just fascinating, isn't it? And I think that, you know, you're lucky you have some stock, and you use the Port Ellen and later on we'll talk about the Big Peat. You know, you use a bit of Port Ellen in there. Yeah. Not a lot of it.
Not a lot, but
right?
It's quite a nice kind of cult concept. But we do, original Port Ellen goes into every single batch of Big Peat. Not a lot, but it does go into every batch. Just raising that minimum age with 2 ml by 10 years, but it does go in.
I mean, Douglas Laing would be famed for their blends initially. I think, if we're going to be honest, their blends are standout. They're super well constructed at the moment, you know, in terms of the branding and what's going on there. Slight name change in one of them recently, but you know, it's and for those, some people might not have noticed that slight name change. But yeah, I have in front of me right now the Epicurean ruby port cast finish, 48%. This is the lowland blend, and it's not a blend of malt and grain. These are special. These are blended malts. Yeah, very, very interesting pieces of work. So, although you might have a very old, very tasty 32-year-old, I'll make do with a
I'm not necessarily
Epicurean.
I'm joining you. I'm having a Scallywag.
Oh,
I need to bring myself down from the cloud, but I mean, it's for me, it's a staple. It's Speyside blended malts, single cask single malts. I think it's an absolute cracking jam. But cheers, Paul.
cheers indeed, Sláinte indeed. So yes, thank you very much. Oh, brilliant. Oh, no, I'm loving this, and I do. I mean, I have the Scallywag here as well, and I want to talk about that Scallywag that's in this box. And I was very lucky. The whiskies I'm tasting just now, I took part in a specific Douglas Laing's tasting, which was unreal. 4 new whiskies that were about to come out, and they really are. I mean, they're just mind blowing. I'm not even too sure if they've been sold out, because I tell you what, I had a message from one of my friends who, I don't know if he's on tonight, Rudy, and Rudy said, "Listen, Paul, don't worry. I went and bought 6 Timorous Beasties." I was like, see if I've missed the Timorous Beastie. So I haven't even checked, and I totally forgot to go on and have a look. So I will. Is there any left, Stuart?
So we've got staff shops. So some, I mean, a very few filter into staff shop. We only had 2 filter in, and it was me and our CFO that were fighting for the last one, and then our office manager said there's 2, so me and Danny didn't have to resort to fighting one another. But I got one and Danny got the other, so it was our cash strength Timorous Beastie. And I was comparing it. Someone had mentioned Aberlour Buna, one of my favourite drams, which is always a sherry bomb. If anyone knows Aberlour Buna, that batch sequence, it's a very cult whiskey. Timorous Beastie is it's a vanilla bomb. It's just a bourbon bomb of whiskey. It's so intense. It's a wonderful dram, and amazing how, I don't know if you picked up how smooth it was. And it's a cash strength 54.9%. It's not ethanol heavy. There's a huge amount of vanilla sweetness to it. And surprisingly, that's why I bought it.
The colour of it is just white. It's
yeah,
just clear. It's just clear. You know, it's clear liquid. It's it's see through, and so there's none left. So I'm going to have to. Rudy's going to have to do me a favour and give me.
Oh, there is some left, just not in our staff shop. So nothing for.
Well, there still is some online.
There will be some online, but nothing for the Douglas Laing team.
This is happening right now. This is happening. I have this issue where if I didn't get it and someone goes and buys it, I'll be annoyed.
If Fred Laing could see this, a live sale.
Listen, do you know what? This is the way we do these kind of things. I would get to that point. I'd be like, I need this. It would really freak me out if I didn't get it. And I have them all. Like, and I told you there's only one I don't have. I think it was there's a Chinese release and a Japanese release at the same time. I think it was Japanese. Yeah. And I managed to get one but not the other. I think I got the China release and not the Japanese, I think. And I don't even have it because it's sitting in storage. So let's see if I can purchase that one while we chat. Because it is really interesting. And the amount of times that I would have used, it's great because you can just buy from your website. And for those that are in Northern Ireland, shipped directly to my door, no problems, no questions asked. We were part of the UK, so it's perfectly fine. There has never been an issue. So thank you very much for that. But you have outlet all over the world. Well, you are genuinely the global brand ambassador. You genuinely do sell to people all over the place. What markets are you not in? It's probably a good question, but what markets are you in? Where are you strong? Where does the brand favour? Where do people really latch on to? And I'll answer that insofar as I know that you've had, quite specifically, the Dutch, range. So that I'm sure the Dutch love it. I mean, if they have their own range, I mean, clearly they love it.
Yeah, I mean, the Netherlands is a very big market for us. France is also a big market. Italy, UK is a very good market for us as well. Germany, Belgium. Looking more, let's say, international, we've got very decent links within Asia, Japan, Taiwan. We've got two team members out in Taiwan who are based in Taipei, who do a wonderful job for us, and then we've got some very good links within the US and Canada.
See,
it's great. I mean, global is a very loose term, but virtually it's been great. I did a 4 a.m. tasting with Canada a few months ago, so that was great. Getting out of my bed at half 3, but it was really good fun. It was a really good laugh.
They are. See, but being in those markets it really must be a warming thing for the business. They must be just like, yeah, this is great. You know what? We're connecting. It's not just with our local market. I mean, Scotland, people in Scotland go mad for this stuff. I mean, the fact that you can, particularly that the blended malts range, I mean, it has real connectivity with local people. So you've managed to do that. And I thought that was quite smart. Maybe you don't realise it yourself, but actually connecting. Like I'm from the south of Glasgow. I'm a lowland guy. Do you know what I mean? Having the ability to have this lowland, blend just makes me feel homely. I'm like, listen, that belongs to me. And then knowing what I love. So I love Islay. So having that, that's a connection. I'm like, I'm really into that. So you've created that at home. I think you've really connected with with local people, local populace, just by having the regionality of it. So I'm assuming, when you go abroad, when you go outside of Scotland and you're connecting with all these different markets, it really just must be like, yeah, wow, we're doing something right here. We're connecting with these people. The tie-ins must be great. There really must be something special going on there.
Yeah, I mean, I was said the other day, it was a kind of almost Freudian slip that, it's one of, I think I was talking maybe a single cask and said it's one of the best whiskies in the world. And I quickly correct myself, well, Scotland. And it's, in that moment, I made myself realize that, every single country has their own liquid, whether it's beer or wine or spirit or whatever it may be. Scotch whisky for me it's a wonderful, wonderful liquid, and it is globally renowned as one of the best whiskies in the world. And it's wonderful to think that let's say it was Glengoyne that was talking about, for example's sake. I've driven past Glengoyne since I was a wee boy, and it's a tiny little distillery at the foothills of the Campsies that I grew up and climbed 1,000 times. And to think that bottle is across the world in someone else's hands, and it's so ubiquitous globally. And then when we talk about Scallywag and Big Peat, and you see them in the hands of people from all over the world, and John Hung, who's our Asian ambassador, taking pictures of Big Peat and amazing Japanese highballs in bars in Tokyo, this has been through, our blending through Fred and Cara who've sampled these batches, and now it's in the hands of an unknown bartender in Tokyo creating amazing highballs. It's really wonderful to see the stretch that any whiskey has.
And here, once you're in that loop, once you're in those the Tokyo bars with the bartenders there, that union that they have, really everyone gets this idea of that there is a class, there's a certain breed of bartenders that work in some of those high level bars. They're well respected, but having your whiskey in there, it's got it's got a bit of credence, it's got a bit of respect, a bit of people see that. Look, and let's be honest, Asia has always been predominantly, and we talk about the Diageo, effect. Johnny Walker, big on, the blue label that was out there for so long. But breaking into that market, breaking into that kind of lifestyle, Scotch, and how high held Scotch is, even over their own liquid. It's really
I mean, I was talking to this John the other day, and I was in India for 2 years, traveling around India, and we handled Sri Lanka and Nepal, and got to go over to Malaysia and Singapore and do some work. And it's amazing, as you say, the Diageos, the Pernod Ricards, the Bacardis of this world have done such a wonderful job of bringing the on-trade and whiskey and gin and rum into a pursuable career for bartenders, and something that should be celebrated and not dismissed. And they've done such a wonderful job for nurturing that on-trade community that now we're in a position, and I think the next 10, 15 years we'll see a much bigger explosion of bartenders going, right, so we've had these brilliant liquids from Diageo, Pernod Ricard. So what else can we work with? What else can we utilize, and expanding their horizons? And I think that's where independent bottlers like ourselves and blenders and like ourselves, including other people, that they go, have you tried this? Have you tasted this? And that's where we fit in. Is, have you tried a blended malt? It's like, what is a blended malt? Everyone's very comfortable with what blended Scotch is. Everyone's very comfortable with what single malt is. But blended malt is one of those categories of Scotch whisky that historically has been overlooked, and maintains that malt flavour, but it's kid in a candy shop stuff where you're able to take from your favourite single malt distilleries. Wonderful, wonderful stuff.
Particularly when you're expanding the range. So when you have and so let's run through some things. So we've got the lowland bottling, okay? So that's the Epicurean.
Yeah.
Yeah. We've now got Rock Island, Used to be Rock Oyster.
Oyster. Yeah.
Now Rock Island. Interesting. Okay, interesting change in tact.
Feel free to ask me about it if you want.
Go ahead. Why
yeah,
not
so
Rock?
it was originally, I think Robert had picked out in the chat there, was Rock Oyster. That's a good point that we just had as well regarding VAT and what. I can come on to that. It used to be Rock Oyster. I shouldn't sway anyone. Rock Oyster, Rock Island, it is now, is my favourite of the remarkable regional malts. Purely it's my favourite profile. But it used to be Rock Oyster, but when we start talking about salty, maritime, seaweed, lemon, citrus, oyster has that connotation of eating an oyster. And I love oysters, but not everyone does. So we found it to be quite polarizing. So we decided to change it to Rock Island to be a bit more inclusive. And that's all that the Rock Market regional malts are. You know, we've got wonderful dogs and mice and big, handsome men with beards and on the face of it. But it's making whiskey accessible again. And I think that's something we stand for at Douglas Laing. But the liquid inside is, you know, for example, the Rock Oyster, Rock Island, it's the exact same liquid. We've not changed the recipe at all or the specs. But it's all about making whiskey accessible, but still making sure that it's serious liquid inside.
I'm just going to cry because I was flicking through this website, and you know what? I think it's sold out. I think it's gone, and I'm now sad. So I'm going to have to.
There's a few other websites you could try, Paul.
I'm going to have to. Oh, is there? Right. Well, that's okay then. I shall try later. But you know what? I mean, it's an accessible. They're accessible brands. Having your own shop has been great. I think, you know, and I was lucky enough, I think, because of the travel retail kerfuffle last year, because we had a pandemic apparently where you couldn't fly, and I picked up a couple of these because they ended up in your shop online. You know, so this is the travel retail edition at 48%. The Timorous Beastie, and look, Timorous Beastie is Highland. So all Highland, come on, Highland distilleries, all lumped in here. Non-age statement this one, but I mean, you know, you have managed to pull together in the past the massive 40-year-old. So to put this into context, they were all 40-year-old or above malts in there blended together.
Yeah, the Timorous Beastie is, I mean, just that global trip we were talking about just before we went live, you know, fantastic idea. Let's bring out a global travel retail range at the start of 2020. Who knew, right? But yeah, the Timorous Beastie global travel retail is 48%. It's a higher strength, but yeah, so Highland blended malts, single cask single malts, Highlands, Glengoyne, Glengarry, Blair Athol, and Dalmore going into every single batch of Timorous Beastie, regardless whether it's a limited edition or not.
And you know what's interesting about that, because those that are connoisseurs of Scotch whisky specifically, and Scotch single malts and aged single malts, and there's a big, I suppose there's a big following for that. You know, it's really that market in the last 30 years has really just boomed and boomed and boomed, and people, you know, it really has. It's got its badge of honor, really, isn't it? You know, you pick out a couple of big houses, a couple of big names, and then you say, do you know what, if I could try, you know, drink that at 25 years, or if I could drink that at 30 years. But to have the opportunity to drink a Dalmore without any colouring, no messing about there, you know, no nothingness, in a blend, plus 40 years, come on. I mean, it's, for a lot of people, that's a pinnacle drink. That's a pinnacle opportunity to say, listen, I've had a Dalmore 40-year-old. And do you know what, a mere fraction of the cost, to be frank. And yes, it was blended with other really good distilleries, pedigree distilleries with, you know, 40-year-old liquid. So it's accessible, super accessible. I mean, that price is rocketed in you know, into the hundreds over the course of the last couple of years in the secondary market. But I mean, it probably deserves that, you know, in the secondary market. But you know, you guys put out a reasonable price. You then had a 21-year-old as well, which I thought was just absolutely. It's one of, and people who know me when they're speaking to me will know I use it as a go-to for tastings. The 21-year-old I use to take out as saying, listen, you want to try good Scotch? We're going to go with a blend. It's a blend of malts, and here's the 21-year-old all sherry, all dancing, all smiley, Timorous Beastie, and it's great. It is an absolute beast of a product. But there's so many now in the range, so many, and it's amazing how you manage to get each one of them tasting completely different. But there's not a true common ground. There's some similarities, but there's not a common ground with them, and that's based on a couple of things. Some are sherry only. Some are mix of sherry and bourbon. Some are, I think, just bourbon. Am I right? Yeah. So so we've got variant cask usage. And then various ages, and I think that's just been really, it's hat off to you guys creating such an experience, because it is. I mean, you can go through the range and be really blown away by the taste experience of just the one Timorous Beastie range, and then you mess about with the others. Big Peat from just Isla, and we talked at the start there, that Port Ellen injection.
Always good. It's always good. But yeah, the range itself, when you look at the core range, and I was talking about this earlier in my tasting, is that you've got with Douglas Laing, the wonderful thing I love about it, I work with Pernod Ricard, and you had your commercial bottlings, and a huge decision in one big pool coming to Douglas Laing was the learning opportunity. I've always said that if you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room. I had the opportunity to work with Fred Laing, Carol Laing, Chris Leggett, and we work with 65 plus distilleries. And then when you think about that, it's different ages of those distilleries in different casks. Is it first fill, second fill, third fill, fourth fill, whatever it may be. It's amazing to see. I'm pushing and learning every single day, and such a small knit team as well. I think there's maybe 29 of us, the whole company. Which is wonderful. But looking at the traditional flavours, as I was talking about, the remarkable regional malts, the whole idea is that we've got 6. I mean, if anyone has done their reading, you've 5 regions in Scotland that are recognised by the SWA. The islands technically not recognised; they're all highlands. But as I said, Rock Island, I think we'll all agree the islands have a very unique flavour profile. The idea being is that from the Epicurean, Timorous Beastie, Lowlands, Highlands, into Speyside with Scallywag, Campbellton with the Gauldrons now, Rock Islands with the Islands, and Big Peat and Isla. I know it's a long list, but
there's one I missed off my wee speech. There's one I missed off the Gauldrons. Silly boy.
Yeah, but the whole idea is to give you the traditional flavour profile of those regions. So it's trying to, I think it achieves it really well, is encompassing in that ultimate distillation. I think Rock Island does a really good job of it, so does Big Peat, is capturing all those concepts that you have from that region and bringing it within one blended malt and taking the single cask single malts just from that region. And as I said, these are our traditional bottlings. And from that, we did an Epicurean wood series. We're still doing. We've got 3 this year. You tried the Ruby Port in the Whiskey Discovery tasting. Last year was one of my favourites of it was the Epicurean and Reeve Salt dessert wine casks. I mean, there's not many distilleries or companies that are doing dessert wine finished whiskies, and not even that was aged whiskey. I'm very aware this is live, and I can't talk much about it, and I've already done a whiskey tasting, but we're doing a Rock Island limited edition in July. I need to be very careful here. And it should be the end of July that we're releasing it. And I'm really excited for that one. We've got 2 more Epicurean wood series this year. We did a Rock Island. I think I bought 6 bottles of this from the stash shop. It's a Rock Island sherry. So coastal maritime island whiskey aged exclusively in Oloroso sherry. I mean, you don't get much more Willy Wonka whiskey than that. It's great that we have these traditional, like the Port Ellen 32. We've got the aged stock and the credibility behind us to produce traditional whiskies, but we also have the understanding of stock and new make spirit and innovation to produce the weird and wonderful that I think is desired from whiskey geeks like myself and anyone else that wants to proclaim themselves as a whiskey geek. But that's what you want from whiskey companies as a whole. So it was a huge opportunity for me, and I think a no-brainer to move to Douglas Laing.
No, you're spot on. It is diversity. It is real diversity, and it's not. it's not a dry moment. There's not a dry moment because I think if we all have different palates, don't we? You're right what you're saying here. We all have a different taste, and there'll be a lot of people who maybe only stick to even the one type of whiskey. Maybe some people just stick to Scotch, and even within that, Scotch then is maybe we only drink. I don't know. Maybe it's just Johnny Walker Red, and that's just something that they've appreciated for a long time, and that's what they want to keep drinking. But maybe it's just Irish drinkers, and they just drink Irish, pot still, or maybe it's just Bushmills, and we only drink, single malt Bushmills liquid. It's about recognizing that some of those tastes can be found elsewhere. That you have managed to put together the regions and say, well, do you know what? People have certainly are drawn to Islay whiskey, or they're drawn to Speysides, or they're drawn to, to Highland whiskey, and giving them that chance, I think, just to open up, just open up the palate slightly, and just deviate just from their one norm. There's no harm to that. I think it's really nice to give people that opportunity to try. I think even, the approachableness of them. You've got some cask strengths. That's great. That's super. But you've got some that come in around about that kind of 43, 46%. There's not, we don't have to overload on the alcohol. We can introduce people into some of these bottlings.
Yeah.
And each one of them is, an approachable whiskey, and it does give them that flavour insight into the region,
Yeah, I mean, I don't think any of our whiskies drop below 46%. Our Providence range are normally bottled and controlled down to 46%. But the main crux, and again, something I love coming to Douglas Laing and having the freedom to talk about, is as natural as it gets. So, I mean, all the whiskey, the whiskey you're pouring, is it Timorous Beastie duty free or whatever? I could say this about any of the whiskies that you're pouring from us, is no caramel colouring. The colour that you see in the liquid in front of you is natural colour from the cask. And you know what? As a whiskey fan, I don't think there's necessarily inherently anything wrong with caramel colouring. But what's really refreshing is being able to look at the liquid in your glass and then assess it or analyse it from all aspects of it. So you can look at it and say, I think this might be 15 years old in a third fill sherry because it has that nice amber hue. Or I think this is an ex-hogshead or a refill hogshead at 10 years old because it's got that nice pale brown colour. And so beyond the caramel colouring, there's no caramel colouring in our whiskies, is non-chill filtration. We allow all those beautiful fatty acids into the final whiskey. And, again, this is debated regularly within Scotch whiskey and most whiskey industries, is whether this affects flavour or not. Now, this is my humble opinion. It is my opinion. Please don't take this as gospel. But in my opinion, it 100% affects texture. And whether that directly or indirectly affects flavour, in my opinion, it definitely does. Definitely does. Who wants a bacon sandwich without fat and protein? Not me. But that, again, my opinion. But the other thing is, of course, as we touched on, is higher cask strength. So all the remarkable regional malts are high strength. So they are controlled down to 46% is Scallywag and Big Peat, Epicurean and Galdron's 46.2, Timorous Beastie and Rock Island 46.8. But the reason that we do that, the main reason that we do that, arguably the only reason, there's some aesthetic bonuses from it, but arguably the only reason is alcohol carries flavour. Now, as we're talking about, you can push grain whiskies up to 50s. You can push first fill ports that are fairly old. You can push them up to their 60%. Dave Broom did a brilliant piece on why 46, 48% is optimum, because it carries flavour through without being overly overpowering in ethanol. But of course, this is a case-by-case basis. We know globally, whiskey is a raw, natural product. And it's an art form. You cannot replicate this with computers. That's what makes it so wonderful to me. But 46, 48% is around optimum to carry flavour through. But of course, it's a case-by-case basis. If you've got a first fill PX sherry, 25 years old, you could bottle that 60. I mean, if you can achieve the 61% at that age, but you could bottle that 60%, and I don't think the ethanol would be overpowering. It definitely wouldn't be overpowering a PX aged sherry bomb, especially depending on the new mixed spirit, of course, that's going into the cask. So it's always a learning curve, and I think there's always a bottle, especially with independent bottles, There's always something that can throw you a curveball and go, did not expect that. Didn't expect.
Recently, I mean, not your brand, and we won't discuss the exact brand, but I had a Highland Park independent bottling, which was very unusual. It was finished off in a PX cask. Very unusual for Highland Park, you know, as a liquid. And yeah, it totally blew my mind. I was like, wow, you know, was not expecting that, you know, for it just didn't, it really didn't even come close to a Highland Park of, you know, of expectation, you know.
That's the beauty of individual casks, isn't it? Like, I remember, I'd mentioned earlier, you know, Glengoyne. I grew up next to Glengoyne. It's probably my favourite distillery. From a homely point of view, you know, you see it, as soon as I see it, I'm home kind of thing. But I remember tasting my first single cask independent bottler, Glengoyne. It was all bourbon. And it was that way. I was almost disappointed because it's not the Glengoyne in my head, knowing it so intimately. Yeah. And then, you know, the whiskey geek kicks in. And you're like, you know, this is a completely different side of Glengoyne that I never get to see. And then all of a sudden it's, actually, that's really lovely. You know, it's that kind of viscous new make spirit, but the vanilla and the cream, and there's that kind of burnt sugar concept to it. And you start analysing it a bit more. And as you say, that Highland Park, I mean, who was the last time you saw Highland Park aged or finished in PX? Never, right? But again, it's that the appreciation in you builds up and goes, that's brilliant. That's great to see that version of it from that. And that's what independent bottler, I think, offers is a different, not necessarily a relief, but just a different side or a different phase to the distillers that we feel we know so intimately from their commercial bottlings.
True, and because core ranges for distilleries, you know, carry the brand, carry the product, and give us what we love, which is a constant, you know, within that liquid, you know, we get a constant, and I do think, I mean, you turn to independent bottlers just because actually you're going to get something unique, you know, you're going to get something that is, you know, there's no point in an independent bottler putting out what the core range is doing. Don't do that. That's silly. You know, do something different, and we're looking for that as a consumer. You have, I just cracked on and I went from a second one there. I went for the Scallywag, the chocolate edition. Chocolate, just the word chocolate. And whiskey.
That's not been released. No, like Paul, just to make everyone jealous, you're the only person, apart from everyone else was on that tasting, I think it was what, 30 of us?
Yeah.
You're the only person that probably has any of that left that's not released yet. I think we released that on 7th of July, which is World Chocolate Day.
To go with a Scallywag chocolate dish.
I don't have that. I mean, I don't have that yet. I had what I had in the tasting night and it's gone. So until we release it, you're the only person in the world that has that right now.
I know. Now I just feel absolutely special. But 48% and sherry cask. So
the idea behind it is we always find it. I mean, I'm drinking Scallywag here. Core is 80% Oloroso, 20% bourbon, roughly batch to batch. But we always find that it's Speyside Scottish sherry. It just pairs beautifully with chocolate. So we decided to. I firmly believe that Cara did this just to satisfy her sweet tooth, but we decided to amplify this and do a chocolate edition. So what Cara gets to do is go around all of our sherry casks, Speyside sherry cask whiskies, and pick out the ones that are very intensely chocolatey, sweet, treacle, nutty. And then create the chocolate edition, which is, as you say, 48% high strength, 100% sherry cask matured, but specifically selecting the casks that are chocolate forward. So you are the only person in the world.
This is one to buy, Stuart. This is one to go and find and get. You know, we've got a chocolate pairing at the festival, and you know, chocolate and whiskey pairing at the festival, and it's a shame. It's just a damn shame we won't have that in time, you know, for the festival, because actually, you know, I'm working with a chocolatier right now to design the chocolates that will go with the whiskies, and you know, this is great. And I think, you know, if I get my chance to purchase one, I will. I'll be making a beeline for it. Like I know that, you know, it's really interesting. You know, that sometimes the quantity you have an issue. You know, you're limited. I was having a debate with a couple of friends about in Ireland. We've just had a release of the Dream Cask. I don't know if you've come across this. This is Redbreast and the Dream Cask edition, and it went to a ballot. You know, they moved to a ballot system last year, and this year it's followed through. And it's a really strange position for me to be in. I don't. Most of the whiskies I buy, in fact, all the whiskies I buy, apart from the one or two, they're not in a ballot system. I can go to the shop or I go online and look at your shop and I just go, do you know what? I get it. If I don't get it like today because it's not on the site just now, I'm not. I'm kind of sad. But at the same time, I realise, I just wasn't quick enough. I'll try harder next time. But this ballot idea, because of limited stock, and I think it's really strange. Whiskies are meant to be drunk. I hope we see this. Hopefully we have the same idea, Stuart, that whiskies are meant to be drunk. And I know there's a lot of beautiful people out there who are like, Paul, stop it now, because I know that you're just going to say, don't collect them, don't sit them on shelves, just open the bottle. But actually, this is meant to be drunk. If you aren't drinking this, there's something wrong with you. You're missing the opportunity to taste something very special. And actually, all four that were in that box were unique, really unique. And this one stood out for me. I think I said it that night. It just stands out.
It's the rum raisin in it. It's great. It's absolutely brilliant. But I mean, I completely agree with you. My dad's always he's called himself a collector since I was a young boy, and a collector keeps their bottles and sells them. There's not one closed bottle in his house. He's instilled it in me where it's a whiskey's there to be drunk. I think we have, between both of us, I've purposely kept my whiskies in his cupboards at the family house, just because I know I'll drink them. I'll drink them if they're on my shelf. I think between both of us over the past 10 years, him being a lot longer than that, let's say, we have 5 bottles that we've not opened. And the reason being is that we've either accrued them or we've come across them and we think, it's going to be good whiskey. It won't be amazing, it'll be good whiskey, but I bet we can sell that and buy more whiskey with it that we'll love more than that. And that's the only reason that we've kept them. One of them being it was a Connoisseur's Choice Northport Brecon, 1968. My aunt bought that on the day I was born, and I think she paid 35 quid, which was a lot of money back then, to be fair. But I've just never opened it. I've never had a chance to open it. And it's one of those ones like, to sell that? My firstborn even special enough to open that. But I know it's not going to be necessarily amazing liquids, but it's also a very special bottle. Like, when do you find the moment to open that? It's a strange one.
Funny you say that. I mean, look, is my whiskey collection huge? It's big, and yet I open so many bottles, and I open constantly. I will not be able to open them all. That's the issue.
How many do you have that have that much left in it?
I'm even better than that, Stuart. They just don't get to that point. They just go. They're gone. And then they're shared. And people are like, if I like something, I like to buy a couple of each, which, as I say, with that 21-year-old Timorous Beastie, I must have opened, I don't know, in the last year and a half, 2 years, I've maybe opened about 10. Easy. I mean, easy. I mean, it could be way more than that, but I know I've done at least 10 because I can remember 10 tastings recently when I've done the Timorous Beastie 21. So when I like something, when I get that, I would just go and buy as many as I can, and thus they don't get to this amount. They're gone. And sometimes what I do, I mean, maybe I'm a wee bit cheeky. I might just keep a wee sample, and I might put, screw it up, and I'll write what it is on the lid. I don't label it up. Just write what, got a Sharpie and I stick it on there. And sometimes that just gets left there, and that's good, because then I can just grab one off the shelf and go, you know what? Okay, we'll fire into that tonight. Although sometimes it goes into the cooking. So sometimes if it's in the cupboard, and I go, yeah, 28-year-old, sherry cat, not a. It goes in, and we're cooking with it, so it's getting used. Now, we have been in a slight situation where certain, even those measures that maybe cost a lot of money, specifically just to measure, if you're in a bar, maybe it costs you 150 quid or something. And sometimes they end up in the cooking by accident. And that's very unfortunate. Sometimes this happens. And I blame someone else in the house, not me, for that happening.
I was going to say you need a better system, but I understand now.
But I've got to that stage, Stuart, in collecting whiskey, that I only collect now really what I really want to specialise in. I really don't like. I don't chase big bottles, and I don't chase big money bottles. That to me is for the insane and for the extremely wealthy. For me, I like to be the number one collector of something quite specifically. So there's a couple of us that are in that race just now. That we collect Bushmills. So I know that there's a couple of guys that are on about the same wavelength as me. They're like, we're going to have everything from that one distillery. And I've been at it for years, so my collection is extensive of that one distillery. And then I'll go and pick another couple, But I will be honest, I have every Timorous Beastie. And that's because I have doubles and trebles of them, So the Dutch one that you did, which really annoyed me, I had to go and get a couple of them, because that was like, they're not doing an Irish version. They're not coming to Ireland and doing like Irish Timorous Beastie. That'd be class. Like, could you imagine the wee mousie's face on that one? It'd be like, maybe it has like a wee, like a wee hat, a wee like shamrock on or something. Know what I mean? Maybe he's got like, I'm thinking he'd be pretty cool looking wee Irish, colours on here, greens and stuff. Anyway, and so you did the Dutch one. I was like, listen, if this tastes good, I need to go and get more Dutch. So I had to get a couple, and it's the same. I bought multiples to drink, and not to keep, but to drink. And luckily enough, there's so much within that range that it becomes a collectible. And what I'll be blunt, I do not collect, the Rock Island, and I do not collect. I certainly don't collect Scallywag, and I'm a Space Eye lover, but I don't collect Scallywag, and I don't buy a lot of Scallywag. I buy more Big Peat, and we have one of our club members in Belfast. Jane is on the bottle where you could have your picture on it, and we loved that. We thought it was great, and that was one of the first bottlings I bought in mass because I wanted Jane's pictures on here. So this is pretty cool. This is one of our own, So yeah, I kind of stick to certain parts of the brand, and I kind of keep, keep my keep the ones I like.
Yeah.
I want to talk about other parts of the business because they're the blends. They are the blends, and they are people get the chance, taste the regions, go around the regions, taste them. But you do other cool things. So, Epicurean and XOP. Yes?
Yep.
Tell me all about them.
The Remarkable Regional Malts is obviously the blended malts that we've gone through. And then we've got the exceptional single casks, as we call them, the ESCs. So that goes from Premier Barrel. If anyone has ever read the Fred's tasting notes of Premier Barrel, he utilizes alliteration very liberally. Please, if anyone can get me, I think I've got a Craigellachie here somewhere of Premier Barrel with Fred's tasting notes. It's outrageous. We've got a Premier Barrel, all single cask, Provenance, Old Particular, Extra Old Particular, and then if you're feeling exceptionally generous, we go into our Extra Old Particular Black, which we most recently bottled a 35-year-old Macallan. Before that was a 40-odd-year-old Port Ellen.
This is where my checks just stop. Like the card just doesn't work at that point.
Oh, 100%. But that's the idea is it's our single cask. And what I still find amazing is my dad's me and my dad are both members of Scotch Malt Whisky Society, and my dad first introduced me to single casks, and I remember starting to ask him around 18, 19 when I started to get really into whiskey. And I was like, what do you mean single cask? What is a single cask? And, you know, my young head blew open when he explained that a single malt is technically blended. I was like, what do you mean? You know, as long as it's come from the same distillery, it's multiple casks, whatever. And my wee head just couldn't handle it and blew open. And I was like, so what's a single cask? He went, you know, it's a finite. You'll never taste it again. And that was my first introduction to the raw concept of what Scotch whisky is, or any whisky for that matter. So we talked about it. So single casks is, I still find it amazing that our Premier Barrel Provenance, you can pick some of them up for £40. You pick up a single cask that you will never taste in your life ever again for 40 quid. I find it absolutely baffling, and obviously we go miles above that. I wouldn't make anyone's eye water with certain prices that we go up to, but it's all about offering a range, and we have a wonderful stock. I mentioned the tasting earlier that we've got about 44,000 casks at any one time with Douglas Lay, which is a huge amount of stock. I mean, obviously you don't compare that to Diageo, Pernod Ricard, but it's a serious amount of stock. And we'll go on. I think we're going to go on to talk about the distillery, but with the new site that we're going to be building on, we're taking about 60% of that on site, which is massive. And when you really put that into perspective, that's what we got, 26,000. Did I just nail that? I think I nailed it. 26,000 casks, rough, give or take.
Good maths.
Quick maths. 26,000 on one site of 65 plus distilleries going into countless casks. So you walk into the warehouse, you're going to have Ardbeg, Glenallachie, Glengoyne, Glencadam, Bowmore, Kalila, all in one giant warehouse, and I get to play hide and seek with Fred Laing for as long as I possibly can until I need food.
Very jealous. Very jealous.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, having that is just great. It's just great to see the brand evolve. It's an evolution now, isn't it? You know, we're evolving, and we're going to have this. Well, you have a distillery, so you have liquid coming, single malt, your own single malt, Strathern.
Yeah. We acquired Strathern in November 2019, so that's 71 years. We've been blenders and bottlers, and arguably doing the hardest part of whiskey making, which is introducing it into our wood policy. And you know, we don't just pick casks that are aged and sell them. A huge part of what we do, we have done that in the past, and we still will do it. But 90% of the business of single casks is taking new make spirits from these 65 plus distilleries we work with and introducing it into our cask. So the position that we're in now, having taken over Strathern in Perthshire, very small distillery.
Boutique, they call it a boutique distillery, don't they?
Boutique, I think that's not micro boutique. And then building Clutha, we're in a position now where we've, you know, I'm not tooting on our, we've mastered the concept of maturation across 3 generations now, where we understand where these liquids are going to go. So the hardest part about whiskey making is the maturation process, and we're in a great position now as an independent bottler, blender, now distiller, after 71 years, where we understand the most difficult part of whiskey making very, very well. So for me, it's a great time to come into the business. You know, I came in a month before we took over Strathern, and now we're building Clutha. It's great, really, really exciting.
And where's Clutha based? Where you know, what's it close to?
This is entrapment. This is entrapment, Paul. You know, I can't talk. I can't talk about this. So,
right.
Original site, I'll tell you later. Original site was at the Clyde site, Clutha meaning Clyde in Gaelic. But due to environmental issues, if anyone's seen this, the Clyde site, it's actually very dangerous to build on. To secure the site, it would have been over and above the investment that we were looking at. But the good thing is, as I said, is that we're going from that site to a different site, being very careful here. But the different site will actually allow us to introduce a visitor centre, a bar, bottling line, stock, 60% of our warehouse stock, but also stocking dry goods, bistro. We'll have our office space there as well. It's a campus. It's the Douglas Laing campus. And I cannot wait to actually have people physically being able to come and enjoy it.
You have a car park, Stuart, do you?
Huge car park.
So I could have my name on a car park somewhere. That'd be nice, wouldn't it?
Potentially.
That'd be class, wouldn't it? You know,
That'd be great.
I just drive on up there.
Right next to Fred.
Now here. Is there going to be a cast program? That'll be interesting. That'll be something to entice people, particularly with a new distillery and this idea. That's something I could buy into. That's something I could buy into.
So I mean, these are discussions that we have had, and it's just one of those things that I can't necessarily go into too much detail about whether it's happening or not. But it's terrible because I just want to talk about everything, right? But obviously, we have our reasons. But these are conversations that we have had.
We're used to that kind of language over here. We're used to that language in Ireland because there's so many people who just can't say anything. You know, there's just too many embargoes all over the place. What's really funny is, though, when I drag some people on here to have the conversations, I just drag that information out of them, which is really interesting. You know, we had one of our local distilleries on here the other night, literally, who've now thrown out their first ever pot still out of Northern Ireland, specifically out of Northern Ireland, since Cumber back in the 50s.
Nice.
First time that pot stills come out of Northern Ireland since then, and really interesting. And dragging that information out of one of the head international superstars for their distillery. There's embargoes, and then there's like people who can't hold the water. Do you know what I mean? And you just know when to ask the question. But no, what you have going on there is something special. It is the evolution of the business. It's the evolution of Douglas Laing.
Yeah, I think it's the organic next step. And to kind of, I mean, something we can talk about. I mean, we're optimistically looking at September 2021 for being the first run of spirit from Clutha. So that's obviously. I mean, we've all been living this hell for the past year. That's an optimistic look. It's not a guarantee, but I think the way that we're looking just now, and with tiers dropping and what have you, optimistically we're looking at the spirit running on September 2021. So that's great news. I mean, that's optimistic, but it's just nice to see that that's how close we are to having a fully functional distillery.
It is great news, and do you know what? It's funny because it's in a period. Scottish whiskey's it's a really strange period for Scottish whiskey because in Ireland at the moment the comparison is quite similar. In Ireland at the moment you have a lot of new distilleries, only because we only had 4 or 5 distilleries.
Yeah,
and now we've got potentially 35 plus distilleries. So we've got lots of distilleries all happening all at once, and they're all coming on board. They're all doing their wee thing. Some are absolutely great because they're at the moment they're really just bottler and bonders, and then they've got their distillery and they're waiting for their turn before their liquid gets on for the 3 or 4 years that they're going to wait. But in Scotland, you're in a similar kind of quandary with these new distilleries because there's a lot of new distilleries. I don't know if there's probably not as many as 30 coming on online in the last year or two. But there's a lot. I'd say, I'm going to take a guess, but there's at least 10, maybe 15. Do you know what I mean? And the big boys, the big boys are stepping up and creating new distilleries. You know, they've seen the rise in what is expected, potentially because of their blends that they need more. They need more production run, potentially. But there's new distilleries happening all over the place. I mean, Glasgow's a plethora of distilleries really now, isn't it?
I think a lot of people are looking at the opportunity that gin's had its boom in the last 10 years plus, and obviously it's very easy to create gin very quickly. So from a cash flow point of view, if you can ride the wave of that for 3 years before 3 years minimum to become a Scotch whisky, 10 years minimum or 8 years minimum to become a viable product, let's say.
An 8-year product.
Yeah, and you know what? That's not necessarily true for when we were talking about Strathern. Strathern's 4 years old, and we were talking about it. I genuinely believe you'd be hard pressed to pick that out from a 12 to 15-year-old sherry lineup with other whiskies. And that's me talking very liberally there, but gin is given this wave of whiskey distilleries can open up with the absolute objective to open up Scotch whisky and release gin. Isla Harris, for example, a great example, producing amazing gin, was never their objective. They're a whiskey distillery. That was always their keen objective. And Isle of Harris gin is amazing gin. They're always been keen to run whiskey, and I think 15's a comfortable estimate for how many.
I think it is. The more I'm thinking about it, I'm like, there's just so many now. I mean,
there's loads.
I mean,
Torveig, Dalmunach are two big ones. You know, Torveig opening the sky, Dalmunach part of Pernod Ricard's portfolio, one of the most beautiful still rooms you've ever seen.
Yeah, Nick Neen.
Yeah.
Rassay. I mean,
Brora's opened back up. Port Ellen, Rosebank.
The big boys are opening up some.
You know, that's some big names, but they're opening back. They're new distilleries. You know, it's not the original stills. It's completely new distilleries.
No, because those original stills have been moved on or indeed destroyed. But we've got Edinburgh. I think what have we got in Edinburgh? We've now got the Diageo Experience opening up in Edinburgh.
Johnny Walker, yeah, Johnny Walker.
Delayed a year, but I think it's now ready. Is it?
I mean, I've seen a huge amount of activity around it, but yeah, that looks like it's. I
have an old friend who's managed to get a job in there as an ambassador. So fair play to Patrick. Fair play to you if you're watching tonight. Well done getting the job in there. But yeah, it's that's interesting. To me that's an interesting place. It's based in the old. I forget the name of the place when it comes to, but it's right on Princess. It's right on Princess Street, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's right on. What was the name of that shop? I want to say Harrods, but it's not, because that's London. But it's the similar type. House of Fraser.
Yes.
Wasn't it? House of Fraser building. Yeah, but it's been in the pipeline for some time, and the delay that they've had. But it's going to be a quality attraction for Edinburgh.
100%. And it's amazing that's centric around Scotch whisky. You know, it's a huge drag, and it is bringing Scotch whisky to the forefront of people's minds, and not just what we've seen probably as this old man's drink, which I think is a horrible way of looking at Scotch whisky. And not that old men shouldn't drink it. Of course they should bloody drink it. Everyone should bloody drink it. But it's opening up and making it more accessible. And the fact that Johnny Walker have that experience is great, because it glamorizes it and brings it into a completely different market, I would argue. And it deserves that, because Scotch whisky, people tell me, oh, I don't like Scotch whisky. Rubbish. Absolutely.
I think it's the first time. I mean, I love the history of Johnny Walker. I'm glad that you can talk about other brands for a moment, but I love the history of that brand, the actual history. I mean, you go way, way back to the original kind of, you know, the first Johnny Walker, the sons of John Walker, and what happened there. And yeah, they are now really only focusing on the local market. A lot of their attention to business and attraction and everything else has been outside of Scotland, specifically targeting markets and markets upon markets, and elsewhere, and making a massive name for themselves. So it's nice to see something coming back to the homelands. It's nice to see.
Yeah, it's always encouraging that brand home. And John Walker and Sons have been massive and instrumental in whiskey history. And one of my favourite stories was and I guess it goes back into blended malt, where it's blended malt has been a category that's been completely overlooked. And when you look, was it the Phylloxera disaster, one of my favourite stories in history, where wine was destroyed, grapevines were destroyed, and high society had nothing to drink. They had no brandy and cognac. So all of a sudden, John Walker and Sons, John Dewars and Sons, Chivas Brothers started blending these sweet grain whiskies with, at that point, what were really harsh malts, and created blended Scotch as a category. And blended malt got completely overlooked historically. All of a sudden, it was blended Scotch, single malt, or nothing. And for literal decades, centuries now, which is crazy to think about. And then all of a sudden now, in the last 20 years, we've seen ourselves, Douglas Laing, Compass Box, Naked Grouse, Monkey Shoulder, now capturing the blended malt and showing people that it's a great, great category. But John Walker was very instrumental in introducing blended whiskey as a viable product, and absolutely took it off with it.
I'm on the Timorous Beastie. I'm on the Timorous Beastie. Meet the Beast cast strength. So hopefully I get a bottle of this. I will be, but 54.9%.
vanilla. It's just a vanilla bomb. It's burnt creme brulee on the top, like not burnt, but really heavily charred demerara sugar, cream, delicate spice throughout it. I don't think that's prominent. The vanilla.
There's like a fizzy cream soda.
Exactly.
Curling on your tongue. That is lovely. No, look, I mean, I'm excited for your distillery. I'm excited for single malts coming from it, and as long as we don't lose the passion that we have with these blends, because I think this is the bread and butter stuff. I have picked up a couple of the Epicureans, and they are in some random, shops. They're in some random little places just all over the place. I remember I was driving through. It's not Girvan, it's the town of Mabel. Was it Mabel? I think it's Mabel. On the way down to Stranraer, and I went into the bakery, and next door there was just a wee shop. I think it was a wee gift shop, actually. I'm not even too sure if they were allowed to sell whiskey. But they did. They were selling bottles of whiskey, and there was I picked up, I think it was a bottle of, was that an Arran? I want to say it was an Arran, aged single malt. And again, lovely wee pieces of, again, just something to try. But, not, again, accessible, not overly expensive. The majority of this range, the majority of the product you put out is, particularly RRP, is not, it's not overly expensive. It's something that people can dabble with. So yeah, you will have your big bottles, and and hopefully at some point I get to try some of them. But the majority of your range is accessible.
Yeah.
So you go on right now. We can get a bottle of Strathern, £80. Yeah. Now that might sound like a lot of money, but it is a 4-year-old liquid, which will take on, those 8-year-olds that you talked about. It will take on.
It was funny
potentially.
When we took over Strathern, Cara, Chris, and John. John's our head of production. John Torrance, absolute genius guy. Absolutely love talking to him, learn from him every time I talked to him. But they went up to Strathern and they looked at the casks and what is that? They couldn't. What the hell is that? It wasn't a cask. It wasn't a firkin. It wasn't a quarter. They couldn't figure out what they had done. What Strathern have done is take casks and create a different size of cask. So I mean, it's weird to say that casks organically grow in the wild, and that it's wild to say, but you know what I mean. They occur in different wines and beers and whatever it may be. They occur in the world. So hogsheads, of course, are fabricated size of cask. So what this effectively is a tiny hogshead. They've deliberately created these out of sherry casks so that there's just a lot of oak contact, a lot of wood contact, and therefore maximising the aging process. And that's what they did. Zach Shenfield, who he hates me calling him the master distiller, but he's the head distiller. Young guy, and he's an absolute genius. And we did an interview. I think I've posted it on our YouTube channel. You can maybe have a look. And he talks about preparing the new mixed spirit, and he wanted to prove that you could create a 3-4-year-old Scotch whiskey and have it taste just as good as a 15-year-old, 20-year-old counterpart. And I think they did it with
that's something the guys over here would love to hear. I mean, and that the distillers here would love to hear, because there are certainly, and we talked about that pot still that's come out now. It's a blended pot still, but again, it's that 5-year-old blended pot still, and it will stand up. It will stand up, to some of its counterparts. There's no doubt about that. And there's a couple of whiskies over here, 7-year-old whiskies that could genuinely blow big numbers out the road. If we talk about ages, and people do have that badge, mentality, but some of these younger whiskies, if it's done right, if it goes through the correct maturation process, that using the right barrels, I think we can get to a point where some of these whiskies are well worth drinking, and maybe you don't have to go chasing big money products. Maybe you can live within your means and drink comfortably. There's some big whiskies out there, really, hard to reach whiskies, hard to find whiskies. I always think to myself, and that's why I mentioned earlier, like, I no longer chase those kind of whiskies. I suppose if they tasted amazing and I felt I was missing out. And I was,
that's the thing, isn't it?
Yeah, I would do that. But I like to look at what's around me and what's accessible, and I like to pick up on those those whiskies and get a good drink from it. Our whiskey festival gives people the opportunity to taste whiskies that might cost at the moment, depending on their age and the popularity and everything else. Maybe whiskies that are maybe bottling at or selling at £4,000 or £5,000, whatever it is. And we'll give them a chance to taste that in small form, miniature form. They're not going to get the whole bottle, but they'll get a liquid. And yet at the same time, the festival is an opportunity to introduce brands. It's an opportunity to introduce whiskies and let people taste whiskey that they've never tasted before. And I really should have said this at the very start. I genuinely am chuffed to bits. If that's the right terminology, I'm just uber proud that Douglas Laing wanted to be part of this festival. I really do mean that. And at some point, I think this festival, will outshine many of its competitors, because we're in a lovely big community where people want to come and drink whiskey, and there's a lot of choice out there. But I think this festival has attracted the right type of brands and distilleries on board, and I'm just genuinely blown away by the fact you guys want to be involved. I really do mean that, and I'm only because first of all, I love the liquid, but I love this brand and the way you've created, an accessible product, allows people to go around the regions, taste the regions. Do you know what I mean? If they want to go and get a single malt and they want to try some aged product and they want to try a different variant in cask, or they want to try a different cask strength version, you have a lot of that, and you're giving people choice. The whole thing about the festival is about choice. We don't have 55 brands involved in the festival for no reason. They're involved to give you choice, to give the people the choice, and that's what we bring. And there should be something at this festival for everyone. And that's true.
That's what makes whiskey wonderful, right? If there was one whiskey that everyone loved and that was it, there'd be one on a shelf, and that's rubbish. No one wants. I don't.
It's called vodka.
Yeah.
No, I'm not.
But that's it, right? It's designed to taste like nothing.
But
that's what makes whiskey so bloody wonderful. Is there's so much. I was doing a tasting we had an induction with one of our new staff members today, going through the range, the remarkable regional malts, and if all 6 of them, water, yeast, and barley aged in oak, and you have 6 completely different whiskies, completely different. And that's for me, and Paul, I think the conversations that we've had, but I think we share the same sentiment. That's what makes whiskey, whether it's with an E or not, it makes it so exciting, because it's an art form, and it truly is an art form. And I think anyone that follows music or whatever, I think it's the exact same form of inspiration and passion that you gain from it, from whether it's art, whether it's painting, it's music, or whatever. I think that's exactly what I gained from this.
It's the best chefs, isn't it? We all love food. We all eat food. We eat food to survive, but some of us eat food because we enjoy it. There's an enjoyment factor to it. But the chefs, the chefs could just hit you with a bit of chicken and some vegetables, but no, they don't. They go and get you the chicken, and then they get the seasoning, and then they cook it to the point where they think that the seasoning is working, and then they add the extras to it. The artistry in that, the artistry of someone spending a lot of time composing the music, as you said, it takes certain people, and these blenders, the blenders, the distillers, the nosers, the people who are behind those creations, man, they're doing something special. And that's why I always say that these people who do that part of the job, sure, you've got an extraordinary job, and you're out there talking the talk and sharing the experience and the love and the liquid with everyone. But these guys in the background who are, their entire life in some cases has been built around creating these magnificent whiskies that we get to try. Now, some whiskies are not as good as others, but I tell you something, they're in a bottle. They've made it that far. Someone has worked hard at it. Someone has put it, to the point where they think that people will drink it. And I think the respect that we need to show these people is huge.
Yeah.
Now, not the same as the nurse saving lives in the hospital. But in this industry, the blenders, the distillers, these are people who need to be given, credence, and plaudit where it is due. I am super. Yeah, you can become quite nostalgic, talking about whiskies to a point where you're like, do you know what? I really feel for this person, or I feel that I'm in touch with this person. I've cracked open some really, really old whiskies in the past. And luckily enough, this year again, we've got some bottles from, potentially I might open some really, old bottles, but we're definitely going to look at some stuff from 1950, 1960, 1970s and 80s. We're going to look at that period. And we'll open a lot of bottles which are meant to be open. They're not meant to be sitting on someone's shelf. They're meant to, we Jimmy, who worked in the distillery back in 1951, he made the whiskey.
Yeah.
And he didn't make it to sit on your shelf or in a vault or, to be looked at as a piece of artwork. He actually made it for you to drink. So that's the respect. I'm showing those guys the respect they deserve by drinking their whiskies, by opening that and sharing their whiskies. We're looking at products that, they're just never opened. They've not been seen for that length of time either. Some of them, we drank in the Pogue 1950. I think it was 1950 last year. One of a kind. It was a single barrel offering from 1950. So a single cask from 1950. So you can imagine the amount of bottles that were produced then.
But the guy that filled that cask is probably
he's
arguably not with us anymore.
He's pan-breeder. He's up there, in heaven thinking, listen, lads, drink the frickin' stuff. It's good. I made it. It's good. Drink it. And, I'm thinking to myself, there's some big names in the business right now. Big name, and particularly over here in Ireland, we've got some people who have been in the industry for so long, creating some great liquids. So, and I'll give an example, Helen Mulholland at the moment, who at the moment is with Bushmills. And, she talked about bringing to fruition a 28-year-old whiskey. And she's like, I've been with this 28 years. I've been with this product. We've been with these whiskies. We are custodians of these whiskies, but other people were here before me, and these whiskies that I've witnessed coming through have had people before me, So you, Stuart, are looking at those Port Ellens, or you're looking at, some of these very old expression whiskies and going, listen, some of them are older than me, I'm drinking a lot of whiskey which is made well before my time, well before I was born, and I'm thinking to myself, yeah, this is pretty cool. This is special. This is a very interesting part of the industry, because actually, Stuart, you no doubt you will give me plenty more of these. You will. There's no doubt about that. And, and I'll be very grateful. But at the same time, going and looking at that, anything before, maybe the last 5 to 10 years, you're looking at pieces of history. You're looking at pieces of workmanship, craftsmanship. People have worked hard and made it their lifetime ambition to create their unique taste, their unique malts, blends. But that it's that input that we need to be respectful of. I think even more so as a bottler and blender, how respectful you all must be at Douglas Laing to be custodians of those liquids, to bring them through that maturation process and selection and reblending into some of these bottles. There's a lot of respect going on there,
Yeah, and you know what the big thing, and you talked about it, is that handing down of casks. It's, Sandy Hislop, who I had the pleasure of speaking to regularly, or was he's a master blender of Royal Salute, Chivas Regal, Glenlivet, wonderful, wonderful human genius, man. And we talked, and he talked about how the casks that he's utilising, he didn't put them down. It was his predecessor, and the casks that he's putting down are for his successor. And translating that into Douglas Laing is wonderful. To think that the casks, the 32-year-old Port Ellen, I've got a sample in front of me, which, you know, don't get, that's a piece of whiskey history. I mean, I get, you know, butterflies thinking, you know, when I was tasting it today. It's that cask was arguably handled by Cara's grandfather, who's since passed, and she's the one that gets to bottle it. It's really what, and Chris and Cara have two wonderful kids who I'm sure there's no pressure, but one day might take over the business, and they'll be bottling casks. It's really wonderful to see that family aspect to it as well, and as you say, it's this tracing of history, that is very much alive within the whiskey industry.
We've had a lot of comments in here, but I think a lot of people have just been listening to this. But I think some of these points are really interesting. I mean, Jonathan's just throwing in one at the very end here, but which I really like, and you know, it just comes on to something I wanted to say, which is, you know, at the moment we live in a throwaway society. Stuart, we live in a throwaway society. We're very as humans, we're very greedy and we're very selfish, and yeah, we just there's a lot we don't care about, and that's a generalization, but it's true in so far as that the amount of rubbish we put, you know, back into the earth is huge. You know, that we are, yeah, we just, maybe food waste, you know, we waste a lot, and yet here we are, you know, talking about whiskies, which, yeah, I mean, generations have passed away, and yet we're now only getting the opportunity to sample them. We're doing it now, just getting the chance to savour that. And that's a very interesting kind of conundrum that we have as a human. You know, for me, I'll go down the road and have my takeaway food, you know, and I'll have lovely wrappers and stuff, they go into the bin, and that I don't really think about it. And yet here I am, you know, cracking open bottles of whiskey, 20, 30, 40, 50 years old, 60 years old, 70 years old, maybe potentially this year I could have cracked open a 100-year bottle, you know, and thinking about that going, yeah, do you know what? That's not throwaway stuff. We're not throwing that away. We're not in that mindset. We're respecting what's going on here. It's respect. And yeah, I think there's nothing quite like it in the world. And you know what?
And you know, we talked about it being an art form, but at the end of the day, it's a finite art form. Whether you drink it, if you don't drink it, you keep it and you just appreciate it. And it's not necessarily being appreciated to its fullest. That when you do decide to truly appreciate this art form, it's not permanent. It will disappear eventually, regardless if it's a batch of single malt or a batch of blended whiskey, or if it's a single cask and there's only 320 bottles. It's finite, regardless of the flavour profile.
It is. And you know what? It's a bit like cars at the moment. We'll go and buy a car, and you know, we'll have it probably for, I don't know, 3 years now. I mean, it's a 3-year kind of turnaround with a car, because you hand it back before you need an MOT, and you get your next one because you don't want to pay your MOT really, which is really strange. But you know, it's that, you know, we have, you know, we've got to that point. You know, do you respect your car anymore? I know that my grandfather, you know, he loved these cars. They weren't like uber fancy cars. They were just lovely cars, and he would keep his car for as long as he could. I don't think he ever wanted to get rid of a car, you know. And yet, I think we're at that point where throw the car back. Mobile phones. I mean, how often do you change your mobile phone? I know for a fact at the moment I'm having to change my phone nearly every 9 to 12 months. You know.
Yeah.
And it's just that type of environment that we live in. Clothes. Oh my God. Now, in saying that, I'm a bit funky insofar as I like to go and find some clothes that I used to wear when I was maybe in my 20s, and now they fit, because at one point I got really, really fat and was like about 18 stone, and now I'm back to about 15 stone, which is still fat, but it's not as fat as then, and actually I can still fit into some old clothes. So I'm finding some cool jumpers and t-shirts and little hoodies and things. I'm going, that's cool, I can wear that again, and it's coming back, it's fashionable, that's fine. But you know, it's still, we're still in that environment whereby, you know, a piece of clothing, you know, we take it for granted. We go and buy an our t-shirt, or we go and buy an our whatever it is, you know, and just put it on and throw the other one away. And it's be done with. And yet here we are with the whiskies, specifically with the whiskey industry. Do you know what I mean? Looking at a product which it takes time for it to even get into the bottle, for it takes time to get onto the shelf. It takes so freaking long that the person that made it isn't with us anymore. That the person who first came up with the concept, we're going to do, what we're going to do? We're going to get some sherry bots from, over in Spain, and what we're going to do is we're going to put some whiskey in it. That idea was 35 years ago. And yet now I'm only experiencing it. It's
Crazy.
it is a beautiful process. And it's very, I do get emotional with it. I get emotional with that.
No, as do I. And it's you should. And if and it's something I'm very passionate about and I love, but you should, if especially the fact that we're working in it, we should be passionate about it because God forbid we wasn't. Who else out there? I'm sure there's a few other people out there that would be, but it's the right thing to do. And there's obviously a massive community, and you know what? Festivals like this only help with that. They only help establish those whiskey communities where like-minded people can come together and get very romantic and passionate about it, because that's exactly what we should be doing. It's the right sense of it.
I couldn't calculate the amount of whiskey drinkers in the world. I couldn't calculate that. I'm sure there's a sales mechanism to find out potentially how many there are. But I'm going to take a rough guess. I'd say, I don't know, 700,000 whiskey drinkers. I know that. I'm sure there's way more.
Oh, there's way more. Gotta be the million.
Do you know what? Well, do you know what, Stuart? I'm only going on like, people who maybe support or look at other people's social media accounts and everything else. And I'm just saying, even in my head, 100,000 to me is a massive number.
Oh, it's got to be millions.
Anyone beyond that, I'm just like, wow. You know what? And this festival is really interesting because we last year we had, we had people representing just about every part of the world. A lot of countries were represented. People who just tuned into the festival either got their tasting packs, or tuned into the festival from different areas. It was just mind blowing because we were like, you know what? They share the same passion that I have for this. They're going to drink this. They're going to drink the same whiskey I'm going to be drinking. We're going to be sharing that together. And yet we're in different parts of the world and we're doing it at the same time. And the technology is great because we have that ability to do it. I love the meeting up personal, face-to-face, getting to see everyone and the delight that people have in their eyes. And and those conversations that you can have personally with people, and before and after tastings. But it is a global community, and I think Mark's saying 100 million plus. I'm not sure. I just don't know. I know there's a lot because we consume a lot, and that's why we can work out consumption-wise because there's only so much liquid one man or one woman can drink. So the amount we consume would equal the amount of whiskey drinkers we have. But it is a super, it's a super community. It's something that I'm super passionate about. I've got lots of passions in lots of different areas of life, but this is to me, as I say, I'm very jealous. I'm now on the Big Peat, by the way. I moved on to the Big Peat just to finish off, which is a cast strength edition. It's called now am I going to say this right? Petrichor.
It's based on the word petrichor, which is the smell of earth when rain hits it. So we call it petrichor. And this is our aligned with the festival in May. This was our so it's 53.9%, 54.9,
53.8. It says.
Oh, you're so bloody close. Cast strength Big Peat. I know in the irony, it's rain. There's not a drop of water in it. It's cast strength Big Peat. It's that explosion in your mouth of going from chimney smoke and sweet tar, and then it's spilling out onto the wood cabin floor and igniting it, and it's just wild bonfire smoke when you finish.
That's poetry, Stuart, and it's true though.
It's true though. It's just that I've always seen it with Big Peat and the cast strength versions. It just amplifies it. It's just controlled, balanced on the nose, and then as soon as it hits the palate, it just grows and grows. It's just watching a fire build with coal and soot and ash. And the thing is, you know what's hilarious and funny? There's sweetness in it. There's loads of sweetness.
Yeah, it's lovely sweetness.
So many people kind of don't see it because it's peat, it's peaty. They don't see that there's so much sweetness to it as well. And I think that's with the blended malt character, just allowing you to kind of balance off those deep Lafroig cuts into the tails and grabbing those phenols to your sweet Kalilas and your rich Bowmores that go into Big Peat. It balances all off, and that's what's great about all of the remarkable original malts. Big Peat's probably more well known. Let's say it gives you that ultimate distillation of that region, and I think Big Peat especially does it very, very well.
But super, I think out of all of them, the Big Peat is very approachable, because a lot of people get kind of, I think you meet a lot of people who are either for peat or anti peat. You know what I mean?
But I think people get converts. People will go. Obviously doing tastings, I'm obviously working with Big Peat a lot, so I do see people go, you know what? I wasn't a Big Peat fan. I wasn't a peaty fan. Love Big Peat. Completely changed my mind on it. But I've also been in tastings where I've, been with other people that have been hosting it, and I've just attended, and you see people in the chat going, was never a fan of peaty whiskey. Lagavulin 16s completely changed my mind. So it really depends on the individual person. But I think Big Peat's a great example of balanced peat, where it's not overly intense in any one direction, but just gives you that balanced flavored profile that I think is a really easy, accessible for peat.
It's really accessible, and in the main, even bottles that you've had. I mean, I've had every Christmas edition, by the way. So every Christmas edition of the Big Peat has been great. In fact, I ran a tasting of trying to run them all through recently, and they are super stuff. But again, price point very accessible.
Yeah, no, 100%. When we look at our single cask, I mentioned earlier, you get £40 for a single cask in some cases, which I think is outstanding. And then remarkable regional malts, very accessible price points, maintaining that malt flavour profile, but kid in a candy shop. Pick your favourite distilleries and let's blend them together. And the great thing is that all the core range, we're looking at about 9,000 bottles per batch. If you look at larger companies, that's a limited edition in one country. It's not a lot. Mm-hmm. And the key focus for us is liquid quality, because, as I said, I think it said, was it 29 of us in Douglas Laing? You think about that. It's not, feedback doesn't just come to me or come to our head of marketing. It goes to Carol Laing. It goes to Fred Laing. They hear about every piece of feedback that comes. It goes to the family. That I think we all feel like an extension of, but it does go to them. So if there's anything that goes wrong, which never really does, they hear about it and it's immediately fixed. And that's the great thing, is that we had a project, for example, today that I know for a fact would take me 3 weeks to push through in a larger company, having worked for a larger company. We sorted it in 2 minutes. Just sat down with head of marketing and the brand manager that was responsible for that specific brand. 2 minute conversation. Right, you're responsible for that. You're responsible for that. Great. We're going to have it done in 3 days. It's just great having that resource available with Cara, Fred, and Chris for expertise, for the business side of things, for marketing, production are downstairs, and everything's there at your fingertips. And if you need to ask a quick question, you can do, and we get to push things through really quickly because of that setup, which is it's refreshing.
No, and do you know what? It makes it so much easier to work with a company like that as well. No offense to the big companies who don't know how to answer emails properly. But
big companies have their space, and I love we all love the releases of big companies. There's no denying. Of course we do. They're fantastic.
I'm right, we do.
But it's quite, I think from my point of view, it's the 65 plus distilleries. It's having access to like Fred Laing and Cara, having these conversations and saying, Fred, I'm not too sure about this, or what's the difference between this and that, and asking very technical questions and being able to get an answer from a very credible resource is exciting. And being able to push through projects quickly or getting an answer for them or budgetary or whatever. It's really refreshing and exciting to work in that kind of fast-paced environment.
Well, listen, Stuart, I said 45 minutes tonight. We've chatted for well longer than that. And you know what? I'm surprised we still have a crowd. I really appreciate everyone coming on tonight. It's been some banter. I'm looking forward to this. You're going to be doing 3 tastings. You're going to be at the festival doing 2 introduction sets. So 2 different time slots within the festival. And then you're going to do like a kind of, I suppose, a really difficult, maybe hard to find kind of range of Douglas Laing products, which I think will be really nice for you to show off and have a bit of fun and talk about the brand further. But listen, your enthusiasm is unreal. It is very infectious. It's great, and I really appreciate it. So thank you very much, Stuart.
Honestly, Paul, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure, and I really can't wait. And I'm glad that we've picked that 3rd one as well. I'm almost tempted to ask for them to be blind for me as well, and we'll jump straight into them.
I think that might be the case. I think that'd be quite. But I want to say, Sláinte, I want to say thank you very much for everyone coming on tonight. So Sláinte, thank you very much, and we'll see you all soon.
Sláinte, cheers.